Hi, I'm Sarah Clark with Disability Counseling Institute. Let's talk briefly about social etiquette for people who are blind and visually impaired. Now, many of these things, after I discuss them, may seem like common knowledge or common sense, but we don't often consider basic adaptations for when we're working with, talking to, having a social conversation with somebody who's visually impaired. So the most important thing to remember is to verbalize everything. And as we go through, I'm going to give you some examples of this. So let's say you're meeting a person for the first time or possibly on a regular basis who's visually impaired. The normal visual social cues are not going to usually apply. So if you think about when you meet somebody for the first time, what clues you have for that social encounter. You know, maybe the person has a name tag, maybe you've seen a picture of what they look like in advance, so you know who it is. Perhaps there's a difference in body language or eye contact that gives you the cue of who it is that you're talking to. But if a person is blind or significantly visually impaired, they're not going to be able to pick up on any of those things. And there are very simple things that you can do to prevent awkward moments or discomfort on both sides. So if you're walking up to somebody, you don't just want to say, "Hi, I'm so-and-so," because it would be confusing if you're in a crowded place of who you're talking to. So let's say I have an appointment with a new therapist and I'm waiting in the lobby or the waiting room. You know, I would expect a disability-informed therapist to come out to the waiting room and say, "Hi, Sarah, it's John. Nice to meet you." So then I know not only that they're talking directly to me, but I know who's talking because they've identified themselves. And if you tend to meet this person in a crowded room, in a room where there are more than just a few people, it's not considered unusual to identify yourself every time so that the person doesn't have to rely on memorizing your voice or other kinds of contextual clues. So anytime I meet with one of my clients who's visually impaired, and since I'm blind myself, I will almost always say, "Hi Bob, it's Sarah. Nice to see you." And that way there's no confusion, there's no awkwardness, there's no discomfort on the other person's part where they're trying to place my voice or, any of those kinds of things. Then the next part of that greeting is if it's typically socially appropriate to shake hands, you don't want to just extend your hand out and wait to see if they figure it out, because not only will that be uncomfortable for you, but it will embarrass the person if they don't pick up on the cue. So going back to that general rule, verbalize everything. As you're introducing yourself, as you're saying hello, good to see you, just say, "I'm extending my hand," or "I'm reaching out to shake your hand." And that gives the person the option of reaching out and shaking your hand or declining for some reason. Maybe they have a cold, maybe they are opposed to shaking hands. So whatever the reason, you want to give them that option, because if you reach out for their hand when they don't expect it to, it's considered disrespectful. So verbalize that cue, and then they can extend their hand and shake, and you can adjust wherever the hand positions are. The same thing will go with any other logistics of where you are and what you're doing. If you're holding a door open for them, say that. Say, "I'm opening the door and I'm holding it open to your right or to your left," or whatever it is. Or you can ask them if they want to be guided. You can ask them what kind of information they want. But as you are moving through space, as you are moving through whatever the social interaction dictates, you want to make sure it's clear what's going on, and it's always better to over communicate than under communicate. So if there's a situation where you're trying to point out a place for them to sit, or a place where you've set a drink or something to that effect, you're not going to want to say things like over here, over there, in the corner, to the left. They're too vague, too ambiguous, and they're really, really frustrating for a person that has little to no vision. So the clock method is considered the standard for giving somebody an orientation to your space or to a particular item you're trying to help them find. And it's very simple. I imagine that the person that you're giving the information to is standing in the center of a clock face. And so therefore everything at 12 o'clock would be directly ahead of them. Directly to their right would be 3 o'clock, directly behind them would be 6 o'clock, and directly to their left would be 9 o'clock, with all the other numbers filled in on the clock face. So if I walk into a room that I'm unfamiliar with, and a person says, there's a chair over there you can set your stuff on, I don't know what they're talking about. And I would have to ask more questions that can sometimes cause discomfort. But if a person, as I walk into the room, says there's a chair at 10 o'clock and there's a coffee table directly in front of it, I can navigate myself, and usually it's pretty seamless. So just consider what other cues you can verbalize. If you're handing a person something, say it. Instead of just holding it out and waiting to see if they figure it out, say, I'm handing you a card, I'm handing you a pen. If you are walking from one location to the next, keep a conversation going so that they can not only follow along with you, but are comfortable with that and don't have difficulty in worrying about whether they're going to lose you during the walk. And any other typical social interactions that would be appropriate are okay to do with people with visual impairments. You just need to give them the cues in a verbal way rather than a social cue. So, if it's socially appropriate in your culture to lean over and kiss somebody on the cheek or greet them by giving them a hug, you don't just want to do that without letting the person know. You verbalize it. And there are some really simple ways of explaining things so it doesn't have to be complex. And those kinds of things will become second nature once you get the hang of it. So consider what you can do next time you are working with or meeting with a person with a visual impairment, or if you're the person with the visual impairment yourself. These are some tips and tricks that you can teach everybody around you of how you would like to be treated, how they can make you more at ease.